Jasmine Williams stands frozen in the first-class cabin as Katherine Montgomery, mother of tech billionaire Nathan Montgomery, screams about her uniform being inappropriate while other passengers record the confrontation. Nathan unexpectedly appears from the cockpit area. Jasmine's career and dignity hang in the balance. The video will go viral by tomorrow. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination and wanted someone to stand up against it. Now let's see what happens when privilege meets prejudice at 30,000 feet. 27-year-old Jasmine Williams had always dreamed of soaring through the skies. Growing up in Baltimore's Turner Station neighborhood, she would watch planes cutting through clouds above her apartment window, imagining herself aboard them. Not as a passenger, but as someone essential to the flight experience. Her journey to becoming a first-class flight attendant at Atlantic Airways had been anything but easy. Jasmine was raised by a single mother, Denise Williams, who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. Their small 2-bedroom apartment was modest but always immaculate. Denise had instilled in her daughter that presentation mattered. In this world, she would tell Jasmine, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And when you get there, you better look the part. Every morning throughout high school, Jasmine would wake at 5 a.m. to help her mother prepare for her day cleaning offices before heading to her cashier job at the local grocery store. In the evenings, Denise would work as a home health aide. Despite her exhausting schedule, she never missed Jasmine's academic award ceremonies or choir performances. Education is your ticket out, Denise would say. And Jasmine listened. She maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school, participated in every extracurricular activity that might boost her college applications, and spent weekends volunteering at the local community center teaching computer literacy to seniors. Her efforts paid off when she received a partial scholarship to Howard University's Hospitality Management program. Even with the scholarship, college was a financial struggle. Jasmine took out student loans and worked nights at a 24-hour diner near campus. She barely slept 4 hours most nights, but her determination never wavered. In her junior year, she secured an internship with Atlantic Airways in their customer service department, impressing her supervisors with her poise and efficiency. After graduation, Atlantic Airways offered her a position in their training program for flight attendants. Jasmine excelled during the intensive 8-week course, mastering emergency protocols, first aid procedures, and customer service techniques. Her trainers noted her exceptional ability to remain calm under pressure, a skill that would be tested repeatedly throughout her career. For 3 years, Jasmine worked domestic routes, often taking the least desirable shifts to build seniority. She endured countless microaggressions from passengers, being asked if another attendant could serve them, having her hair touched without permission by curious passengers, being called girl instead of her name despite wearing her identification badge prominently. Through it all, she maintained her professionalism, earning stellar performance reviews. When she finally earned her promotion to international and first-class service, Jasmine celebrated by taking her mother to dinner at Baltimore's most upscale restaurant. "Look at you," Denise had said, tears in her eyes. "My baby serving the rich and famous in first class." Yet even in first class, perhaps especially in first class, the challenges continued. Jasmine was passed over twice for lead attendant positions that went to less experienced colleagues. Customer complaints seemed to materialize after her shifts with first-class passengers, though the grievances were always vague and unsubstantiated. Her supervisor, Linda Harris, had pulled her aside once to say, "Some of our premium customers aren't used to diversity. Just keep your head down and do your job." Jasmine's closest friend at the airline, Terrell Jackson, had warned her about the Montgomery routes, as they were unofficially known among the crew, flights frequently taken by the Montgomery family and their associates between San Francisco, New York, and London. "Those people expect you to be invisible until they need something," he cautioned. And Katherine Montgomery is the worst of them all. But when the opportunity came to pick up extra shifts on the San Francisco route, Jasmine couldn't refuse. Her mother's arthritis was worsening, and the medical bills were piling up. The premium pay for first-class service could make a significant difference. The morning of the fateful flight, Jasmine had woken early to prepare. She ironed her uniform, navy blue Atlantic Airways blazer, crisp white blouse, and tailored skirt, with meticulous care. She applied her makeup conservatively, as per company guidelines, and styled her hair in a neat bun. Standing before her mirror, she practiced her professional smile and mentally reviewed the manifest. Several VIPs would be in first class today, including Katherine Montgomery and possibly her son, Nathan Montgomery, the tech billionaire whose face graced business magazines monthly. Just another day serving the privileged, she told herself as she locked her apartment door. Smooth flight, good tips, no drama. If only she had known what awaited her at 30,000 feet, she might have called in sick for the first time in her career. Nathan Montgomery had become America's most celebrated tech wunderkind, a modern Horatio Alger story that captivated the nation. At 35, his company Montgomery Tech was valued at over $78 billion, having revolutionized artificial intelligence applications for everyday use. His AI assistant, Montgomery, had become as ubiquitous as smartphones themselves, with over 2 billion global users. The mythology around Nathan was carefully cultivated, a college dropout who coded his first program in a San Francisco garage apartment, surviving on ramen noodles and determination until his breakthrough algorithm caught the attention of venture capitalists. Within 5 years, he had gone from anonymous programmer to tech royalty. His boyish good looks, trademark casual black sweaters, and articulate presentations at tech conferences made him a media darling. What few people knew was that the garage apartment had actually been purchased with family money, and the connections that led to his first round of funding came through his father's golf club acquaintances. While Nathan had genuine coding talent, the runway to his success had been smoothed by generations of Montgomery wealth and influence. Katherine Montgomery, now 65, came from old East Coast money, banking and railroad fortunes that had insulated her family from the economic realities most Americans faced. She had married Harold Montgomery, a successful venture capitalist, more as a merger of assets than a love match. Their marriage had produced one son before ending in a discreet divorce when Nathan was 15. Katherine had raised Nathan with rigid expectations befitting their social position. Private schools, tennis lessons, sailing in the summer, skiing in the winter, all designed to place him firmly within their elite social circle. When Nathan had shown an early aptitude for computers, Katherine had initially disapproved, considering technology the domain of those Indian and Asian boys. She had relented only when Nathan's high school computer science teacher convinced her that tech was where the real future fortunes would be made. Their relationship had grown strained as Nathan built his empire. He had purchased her a $12 million mansion in Pacific Heights, hired staff to attend to her every need, but rarely visited in person. Katherine maintained an active social calendar among San Francisco's old guard elite, serving on charity boards and hosting exclusive gatherings where she subtly reminded everyone of her son's accomplishments as if they were extensions of her own. Katherine's racial insensitivity was legendary among the Montgomery household staff, most of whom were people of color. She insisted on referring to her Filipina housekeeper as the Oriental girl, despite being corrected numerous times. She would complain about those people moving into her neighborhood when a black family purchased a home 3 blocks away. The family's PR team had worked overtime to keep her comments from reaching the press, paying significant settlements to former employees who had endured her behavior. The Montgomery private jet, a customized Gulfstream G650, was in for maintenance, forcing Katherine to fly commercial for her quarterly visit to the East Coast. She had made her displeasure known to everyone, including the Atlantic Airways reservation team who had scrambled to accommodate her last-minute first-class booking. Nathan had planned to take a later flight but changed his schedule to accompany his mother when his chief of staff warned him that Katherine might create issues if left to travel alone. Despite his mother's attitudes, Nathan had cultivated a public image as a progressive employer. Montgomery Tech's diversity initiatives were frequently highlighted in business publications. The company boasted hiring statistics above industry averages for women and people of color, though critics noted most diverse employees remained in lower-level positions while the executive suite remained predominantly white and male. Nathan made generous donations to educational programs for underrepresented groups in tech and spoke eloquently about creating opportunities for all talented individuals regardless of background. Whether his commitment to diversity was genuine or performative remained a subject of debate among industry insiders. Some former employees claimed his public persona masked private indifference, while others insisted he was gradually transforming company culture despite resistance from older board members. The Montgomery entourage had boarded Atlantic Airways Flight 357 from San Francisco to New York with typical fanfare. Katherine had arrived with 4 designer suitcases for a week-long trip, exceeding the first-class baggage allowance but receiving an exception after a quiet word from Nathan to the gate agent. She had immediately requested champagne before takeoff, complained about the temperature, and sent back the warm towel service because the towel felt slightly damp. Nathan had boarded quietly after her, nodding politely to the crew, absorbed in reviewing documents on his tablet. The other first-class passengers tried to appear nonchalant while sneaking glances at the famous billionaire. He had requested only water and asked not to be disturbed during the flight. As the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt signs dinged off, few could have predicted that this routine transcontinental flight would become a defining moment in both the Montgomery legacy and in the life of flight attendant Jasmine Williams. 2 hours into the 6-hour flight from San Francisco to New York, Jasmine moved through the first-class cabin with practiced efficiency. The gentle hum of the engines provided a soothing background as she prepared for the mid-flight beverage service. First class was full today, 12 passengers including the Montgomerys in seats 1A and 1B. "Would you care for a drink, Mr. Montgomery?" Jasmine asked, approaching with her cart. Nathan looked up from his tablet briefly. "Just water, thank you," he said before returning to his work. Jasmine placed a crystal glass of ice water on his tray table with a cocktail napkin, then turned to Katherine Montgomery. "And for you, Mrs. Montgomery?" Katherine didn't look up from her magazine. Instead, she spoke to the air in front of her. "I'll have the Veuve Clicquot. Properly chilled this time." "Of course," Jasmine replied, maintaining her professional smile as she poured the champagne. She had learned early in her career that some first-class passengers preferred to pretend the service appeared magically rather than acknowledging the human being providing it. As Jasmine placed the champagne flute on Katherine's tray table, the older woman finally looked up, her eyes narrowing as they scanned Jasmine from head to toe. "Standards really have slipped at this airline," Katherine said loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "In my day, flight attendants had to meet certain criteria." Jasmine felt her smile freeze in place but continued her service, moving to the next passenger. Behind her, she could hear Katherine continuing, "They used to have weight and appearance requirements, you know. Not just anyone could serve in first class." A flush of heat crawled up Jasmine's neck, but she focused on serving the businessman in 2A. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered this type of behavior, and she'd developed strategies for managing it. Remain professional. Don't engage. Complete your service. As Jasmine worked her way through the cabin, Katherine's comments grew more pointed. "The uniforms used to be so elegant," she remarked to the passenger across the aisle, an older white man who looked uncomfortable but nodded politely. "Now they let them wear anything, apparently." Jasmine's uniform was, in fact, the standard Atlantic Airways first-class attire, identical to what every other female flight attendant wore. The only personal touch she had added was a small pearl pin on her lapel, a gift from her mother that was well within company guidelines for accessories. When Jasmine returned to refill Nathan's water, Katherine shifted in her seat, causing her champagne to slosh over the rim of her glass. The golden liquid splashed onto Jasmine's skirt. "Oh my," Katherine said with exaggerated concern that didn't reach her eyes. "How clumsy of you. Let me get you a refill, Mrs. Montgomery," Jasmine responded calmly, dabbing at her skirt with a napkin. The spill wasn't large, but it would leave a noticeable mark for the remainder of the flight. "You really should be more careful," Katherine continued. "Though perhaps with that figure, you can't help knocking things over. Jasmine was a slim size 6, her uniform tailored perfectly to her frame as required by airline standards. The comment was so obviously untrue that several nearby passengers exchanged glances. Nathan remained absorbed in his tablet, earbuds in place, seemingly oblivious to his mother's behavior. A young woman in seat 3C had taken out her phone and appeared to be texting, her eyes darting between her screen and the unfolding situation. As the beverage service concluded, Jasmine retreated to the galley to compose herself and prepare for meal service. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged the salad plates. "You okay?" asked Kevin Wilson, the senior flight attendant working the flight. A middle-aged white man with 20 years of experience, Kevin had a reputation for running a tight service but not always backing up his team when passengers became difficult. "I'm fine," Jasmine assured him. "Mrs. Montgomery in 1B is a bit challenging." Kevin's eyes widened. "Katherine Montgomery? Nathan Montgomery's mother?" He lowered his voice. "Just keep her happy, Jasmine. Those people can cause problems for the whole airline if they complain." The meal service began, and Jasmine approached the first row with Katherine's special meal. She had requested a specific gluten-free, dairy-free option that the airline had specially prepared. "Here's your special meal, Mrs. Montgomery," Jasmine said, placing the plate carefully on the tray table. Katherine stared at the plate, then looked up at Jasmine with undisguised contempt. "What is this supposed to be?" "It's the gluten-free vegetable tranche with quinoa salad that you requested," Jasmine explained. "This is not what I ordered," Katherine declared, pushing the plate away. "Take it back. I can't eat this." "I apologize for the confusion. Would you prefer the regular first-class meal option? We have a salmon dish or beef tenderloin available." "Are you being deliberately obtuse?" Katherine's voice rose. "I specifically requested a meal prepared without contaminants. This looks like it was thrown together in a dirty kitchen." The meal had actually been prepared by Atlantic Airways' 5-star catering service under strict dietary guidelines, but Jasmine knew better than to argue. "I'll see what other options we have available." As Jasmine turned to leave, Katherine added, "And fix your hair while you're at it. It's unprofessional." Jasmine reached up instinctively. A few strands had come loose from her bun during the beverage service, but nothing that violated airline grooming standards. In the galley, Jasmine took a deep breath and checked her reflection in the small mirror. Her hair was nearly perfect, her uniform immaculate except for the small champagne stain. She knew what was happening, it had nothing to do with her appearance and everything to do with her skin color. "What does she want now?" Kevin asked, arranging dessert plates. "She says her special meal isn't right," Jasmine explained. "Do we have any other options?" Kevin sighed. "Give her the fruit plate from business class." "And Jasmine? Maybe tighten up your appearance a bit. We don't need complaints." Jasmine bit back her response, hurt that Kevin was implicitly siding with Katherine rather than supporting his team member. She fixed her hair, though it didn't need fixing, and returned with the fruit plate. By now, several passengers were watching the interaction with interest. A man in 2D had his phone positioned to record video while pretending to watch something. Two women in row 4 whispered to each other, glancing repeatedly at Katherine. "This is the best we can offer as an alternative," Jasmine said, placing the fruit plate before Katherine. Katherine looked at the plate, then up at Jasmine's face. "Your uniform is inappropriate," she said loudly. "Excuse me?" Jasmine asked, caught off guard by the sudden change in topic. "Your uniform," Katherine repeated, gesturing at Jasmine's standard Atlantic Airways attire. "It's too tight. It's inappropriate for family travel. I'm going to report this to your superiors." The accusation was so clearly baseless that several passengers stopped pretending not to listen. Nathan removed one earbud, finally becoming aware of his mother's behavior. "My uniform is standard issue, Mrs. Montgomery," Jasmine explained calmly. "All flight attendants wear the same design." "Don't contradict me," Katherine snapped. I can see what I can see. You people always think you can talk back. The phrase, you people, hung in the air, its implication unmistakable. A passenger in 3A audibly gasped. Katherine Montgomery unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, positioning herself in the center of the aisle. At 5'4", she wasn't physically imposing, but her designer suit, perfectly coiffed silver hair, and the sheer force of decades of entitlement gave her a commanding presence that filled the first-class cabin. I want to speak to whoever is in charge of this flight, she demanded, her voice cutting through the ambient airplane noise. This uniform is completely inappropriate for someone serving passengers. Jasmine stood her ground, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Mrs. Montgomery, I need to ask you to return to your seat. The seatbelt sign may come on at any moment if we encounter turbulence. Don't you dare tell me what to do, Katherine fired back. I've been flying first class since before you were born. I know my rights as a premium passenger. By now, even passengers in the first few rows of business class were craning their necks to see the commotion. A flight attendant named Alicia Lopez had opened the curtain separating the cabins, her eyes widening at the scene. Your uniform is inappropriately tight, Katherine continued, her voice growing louder. It's distracting to the male passengers and setting a poor example for the children on board. She gestured vaguely toward the business class section where, in fact, there were no children seated. Jasmine's uniform was the exact size specified by her measurements in the airline's records. It fit her professional figure modestly and appropriately, identical to the uniforms worn by white, Asian, and Latina flight attendants throughout the aircraft. The racial undertone of Katherine's complaint was becoming increasingly obvious to everyone watching. I assure you, this is standard Atlantic Airways attire, Jasmine explained again, fighting to keep her voice steady. All flight attendants are issued the same uniform design according to company regulations. Are you calling me a liar? Katherine's face flushed with anger. Young lady, do you have any idea who I am? Who my son is? From the corner of her eye, Jasmine could see Nathan Montgomery finally removing both earbuds, his attention drawn away from his tablet as he became aware of his mother's escalating tirade. Jasmine tried one more time to defuse the situation. Mrs. Montgomery, I apologize if I've given any offense. Would you like me to have my colleague serve you for the remainder of the flight? What I would like, Katherine said, enunciating each word with cutting precision, is for you to be removed from this flight. I find your attitude and appearance offensive, and I shouldn't have to tolerate it in premium class. A passenger in seat 2B, a middle-aged black woman, had begun recording the confrontation openly on her phone. Several others followed suit, no longer pretending to be doing anything else. In the social media age, everyone recognized the viral potential of a wealthy white woman berating a black flight attendant for simply existing in her space. Jasmine felt her chest tightening, the familiar symptoms of anxiety creeping in, shortness of breath, racing heart, a slight tremor in her hands. But years of training kicked in. Never show distress to passengers. Maintain professionalism at all costs. I'll get my supervisor, Jasmine said, turning toward the galley where Kevin was watching with evident discomfort. Kevin, she said quietly. I need your assistance with Mrs. Montgomery. Kevin hesitated, glancing between Jasmine and Katherine. What seems to be the problem, he asked, directing the question to Katherine rather than his colleague. Katherine immediately launched into her grievances. This flight attendant's uniform is inappropriately tight and revealing. It's unprofessional, and when I mentioned it, she became confrontational. I want her removed from first class immediately. Kevin looked at Jasmine's perfectly standard uniform, then back at Katherine. Mrs. Montgomery, I assure you all our uniforms meet company standards, but I understand your concern. Perhaps I can serve you for the remainder of the flight. His failure to defend Jasmine was a painful but not unexpected blow. Throughout her career, Jasmine had learned that many colleagues would choose the path of least resistance when confronted with racism, preferring to appease difficult passengers rather than stand up for what was right. That's not good enough, Katherine declared. "I want her disciplined. This is exactly what's wrong with this country now, no standards, no respect for authority. In my day, flight attendants knew their place." The racial coding in her language was becoming more explicit with each statement. Passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some looked away, unwilling to witness the humiliation being inflicted on Jasmine. Others continued recording, their phones capturing every word. A notification chimed on the interphone. The captain wanted an update on the disturbance. Kevin excused himself to answer while Jasmine stood in the aisle, exposed to Katherine's continuing criticism. "I'm going to call the Atlantic Airways CEO personally after this flight," Katherine announced to the cabin at large. "My son has considerable influence with your corporate board. We'll see how long you keep your job after today." Jasmine felt a wave of despair. This was how careers ended in the airline industry. One powerful complaint, regardless of merit, could derail years of exemplary service. She thought of her mother, of the medical bills, of the mortgage she had just qualified for. Kevin returned, his expression grim. "The captain has been notified of the situation. He asks that everyone return to their seats for now." "And what about her?" Katherine demanded, pointing at Jasmine. "Jasmine will continue her duties in the galley for now," Kevin said, attempting compromise. "That's unacceptable," Katherine insisted. "I want her off this flight when we land. I want a formal complaint filed." From economy class, more passengers had gathered near the curtain, watching the scene unfold. Cell phones recorded from multiple angles. Someone whispered, "Is that Nathan Montgomery's mother?" Jasmine stood perfectly still, years of training keeping her face composed despite the humiliation burning through her. She had done nothing wrong. Her uniform was regulation. Her service had been impeccable. The only offense she had committed was performing her job while black in Katherine Montgomery's presence. As Kevin tried unsuccessfully to convince Katherine to return to her seat, Jasmine noticed Nathan Montgomery finally standing up, his tall figure unfolding from seat 1A. He had been quiet throughout the entire confrontation, seemingly absorbed in his work, but now he stepped into the aisle beside his mother. The cabin fell silent as everyone waited to see what the billionaire would do. Would he back his mother? Use his influence to have Jasmine terminated? Demand compensation from the airline? Katherine turned to her son with a triumphant expression, clearly expecting his support. "Nathan, finally. Tell them who we are and how we expect to be treated. Have you ever been in a situation where you witnessed discrimination happening right in front of you? Type 1 in the comments if you would have spoken up, or 2 if you would have stayed silent. What would you have done if you were another passenger on this flight? How do you think Nathan will react to his mother's behavior? Remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more stories about moments when privilege and prejudice collide. Let's find out what happens next when the billionaire finally breaks his silence. Nathan Montgomery stood in the aisle of the first-class cabin, his 6'2" frame commanding immediate attention. Unlike his mother's flashy designer suit, he wore his trademark casual black sweater and dark jeans, the uniform of Silicon Valley elite who were wealthy enough to reject formal business attire. His expression was difficult to read as he surveyed the scene, his mother standing defiantly in the aisle, Jasmine maintaining her professional composure despite visible distress, and passengers recording the confrontation on their phones. The cabin fell into expectant silence. Even Katherine momentarily paused her tirade, looking to her son with the satisfied expression of someone who believes powerful reinforcements have arrived. Nathan's eyes moved slowly from his mother to the phones recording the incident. He seemed to be processing the situation, analyzing it as he would a complex code problem. Several of the passengers quickly lowered their devices, uncomfortable being caught documenting the moment, but others continued filming openly. "What's happening here?" Nathan asked, his voice quieter than expected from someone of his stature and influence. There was no anger in his tone, just genuine curiosity and something else, concern. Katherine immediately launched into her version of events. This flight attendant has been completely unprofessional, Nathan. Her uniform is inappropriately tight, her attitude is disrespectful, and when I politely mentioned it, she became confrontational. Nathan's gaze shifted to Jasmine, taking in her standard Atlantic Airways uniform, identical to those worn by flight attendants throughout the aircraft. His expression revealed nothing as he studied her professional appearance and the small champagne stain on her skirt, evidence of the accident his mother had orchestrated earlier. "I see," he said simply. Kevin Wilson stepped forward, clearly recognizing the potential business implications of the situation. "Mr. Montgomery, I apologize for any inconvenience. We can arrange for different flight attendants to serve your section if you prefer." Nathan didn't acknowledge the senior flight attendant. Instead, he turned to a passenger in row 3 whose phone was still recording. "Excuse me, have you been filming this interaction?" The young woman nodded nervously. "Yes, since your mother stood up." "May I see it?" Nathan asked. After a moment's hesitation, she handed him her phone. Nathan watched the video with impassive concentration, witnessing his mother's behavior from an outside perspective. The recording captured Katherine's escalating comments, the racial undertones becoming increasingly explicit, and Jasmine's professional attempts to defuse the situation. Katherine's triumphant expression began to falter as Nathan continued watching the video in silence. When he finished, he returned the phone to its owner with a quiet, "Thank you," before turning to his mother. "What are you doing?" he asked softly. The question hung in the air, simple yet devastating in its directness. Katherine blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by the unexpected response. She had clearly anticipated her son's automatic support. "I'm standing up for standards, Nathan. This airline used to be premier. Now they let anyone serve in first class, wearing whatever they want. Her uniform is the company standard, Mother," Nathan pointed out, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel beneath it. "Exactly the same as every other flight attendant on this aircraft." "Well, it fits her differently," Katherine insisted, doubling down. "It's inappropriate. You must see that." Nathan was quiet for a moment, and those close enough could see something shifting in his expression, a memory surfacing. He seemed transported somewhere else briefly before returning to the present moment. "This isn't the first time, is it?" he asked his mother. "I don't know what you mean," Katherine replied, her voice losing some of its certainty. "Yes, you do," Nathan said. "This is exactly like what happened with Mrs. Torres when I was 12. The cabin remained silent, passengers witnessing what was clearly a reference to a painful family memory. Jasmine stood perfectly still, uncertain of her role in this unexpected family confrontation. "That was completely different," Katherine said dismissively. "Consuelo was stealing from us. I caught her with my jewelry." "Her name was Carmela," Nathan corrected quietly. "And she wasn't stealing. You planted that bracelet in her purse because you didn't like how Dad talked to her." "I saw you do it, Mother. I never told Dad, but I saw you." Katherine's face flushed crimson. "That's absurd. You were a child. You didn't understand what you saw." "I understood perfectly," Nathan replied. "Just like I understand what's happening right now." The atmosphere in the cabin was electric. Passengers exchanged glances, uncomfortable witnesses to this family drama unfolding against the backdrop of a larger social issue. More phones had come out, capturing what was quickly becoming a defining moment for one of the world's most powerful tech figures. Katherine attempted to regain control of the narrative. "Nathan, you're making a scene. This isn't the place for family discussions. I simply expect certain standards of service when I pay for first class." "No," Nathan said, his voice finally taking on an edge of anger. "What you expect is deference based on your social position. What you demand is special treatment because of your wealth and privilege. And what you clearly cannot tolerate is being served by a black flight attendant who doesn't cower before you." A collective intake of breath swept through the cabin. No one had expected Nathan Montgomery, whose public statements on race had always been carefully crafted and politically safe, to name the situation so explicitly. Katherine's expression hardened. "How dare you speak to me that way? After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done?" Nathan echoed. "Yes, let's talk about that. The connections that got me into Stanford. The financial cushion that let me start my company. The social network that introduced me to my first investors." He paused. "I've never denied my privilege, Mother. I've just tried to use it responsibly." Jasmine shifted uncomfortably, caught in the crossfire of this family confrontation. "Mr. Montgomery, Mrs. Montgomery, perhaps I should give you some privacy." Nathan turned to her, his expression softening. "No, please stay. In fact." He looked directly at Jasmine's name tag. "Ms. Williams, I believe I owe you an apology." "Ms. Williams," Nathan said, addressing Jasmine directly, "I want to sincerely apologize for my mother's behavior toward you today. It was inappropriate, disrespectful, and has racial undertones that I cannot and will not ignore." The cabin fell into stunned silence. Katherine's mouth opened and closed, her outrage momentarily rendering her speechless. The other passengers watched in amazement as one of the world's richest men publicly acknowledged racism and took a stand against it, directed at his own mother, no less. Jasmine began, utterly unprepared for this turn of events. In her years of dealing with microaggressions and outright discrimination, no one with power had ever acknowledged it so directly, let alone apologized for it. Nathan turned to address the entire first-class cabin. "I'd like to apologize to everyone for this disruption to your flight. But more importantly, I want to acknowledge something that happens too often in our society." He spoke with the same confident clarity that had made his product launches legendary, but with a personal authenticity rarely seen in his public appearances. "Too frequently, people who look like me, white, wealthy, privileged, remain silent when we witness discrimination. We convince ourselves it's not our place to speak up, or we pretend not to see what's happening right in front of us. I've been guilty of this silence many times, including for the first few minutes of this incident." Katherine grabbed her son's arm. "Nathan, stop this immediately. You're making a fool of yourself." He gently removed her hand and continued. 6 years ago, my business partner Darius Harris and I were meeting with potential investors. Darius is black, Harvard-educated, brilliant. He developed the core algorithm that made Montgomery Tech possible. Without him, there would be no company. Katherine's face had drained of color. "This is neither the time nor the place." During that meeting, Nathan continued, undeterred, "One of the investors continually directed all technical questions to me, despite Darius being the chief technology expert. When Darius finally spoke up to correct a misunderstanding about our product architecture, the investor suggested he stick to sales. Darius doesn't work in sales. He's a computer scientist with 3 patents." Nathan's voice grew more passionate as he continued. "I said nothing. I was so focused on securing that funding that I let my friend and partner be diminished in that room. Darius never mentioned it afterward, but I saw the look on his face. I've carried that shame ever since." The entire cabin was captivated by Nathan's unexpected vulnerability. Even Kevin Wilson, the senior flight attendant, had stopped pretending to be busy in the galley and was listening openly. Later that night, I called the investor and declined their offer. I told them why. It cost us 6 months of runway, but it was the bare minimum of what integrity required. Nathan looked directly at Jasmine. "And yet, when my own mother exhibited the same behavior today, my first instinct was again to stay silent, to pretend I didn't notice, to hide behind my earbuds and tablet." Katherine's shock had transformed into cold fury. "You've always been too sensitive, too easily manipulated by these social justice narratives. Your father and I raised you better than this." "No, Mother," Nathan replied calmly. "You raised me to believe that our money and status entitled us to special treatment. That people who serve us are somehow beneath us. That rules don't apply to people like us. He turned back to Jasmine. Ms. Williams has conducted herself with nothing but professionalism today. Her uniform is identical to that worn by every other Atlantic Airways flight attendant. The only difference is that she had the audacity to be black while serving you, mother. And that, apparently, you cannot tolerate. Several passengers nodded in agreement. The woman in 2B who had been recording said, "Amen," under her breath. Katherine's face flushed with humiliation as she realized she had lost control of the narrative, and her son's loyalty. "I won't listen to this," she hissed. "When your father hears about this public betrayal." "Dad will probably say it's about time," Nathan interrupted. "He's been trying to get me to stand up to you for decades." Katherine looked around the cabin, seeking allies but finding none. Even the older white men who might typically have sympathized with her position were studiously avoiding eye contact, unwilling to associate themselves with her now explicitly revealed prejudice. "Ms. Williams," Nathan said, turning back to Jasmine, "I would be honored if you would accept my seat for the remainder of the flight." "I'll move to economy." Gasps rippled through the cabin. The heir to the Montgomery fortune offering to sit in economy while a flight attendant took his first-class seat was unprecedented. "Mr. Montgomery, that's not necessary," Jasmine said, her professional training reasserting itself despite her shock. "I insist," Nathan said. "It's a small gesture, but a sincere one. And," he added, glancing at his mother, "I think we could all benefit from some distance for the remainder of the flight." Katherine's voice was deadly quiet. "If you do this, Nathan, there will be consequences." Nathan smiled sadly. "There already have been consequences, mother. For Ms. Williams, for countless others who have endured this kind of treatment, and for me, watching my mother reveal who she truly is, again and again, and failing to stand up for what's right." He turned to Kevin. "I'll be moving to economy for the rest of the flight. Please reassign my seat to Ms. Williams for her breaks. And I want it noted in your report that she handled this situation with exceptional professionalism." Kevin nodded, clearly impressed by Nathan's stance but also calculating the unprecedented nature of the request. "Yes, sir, Mr. Montgomery." Nathan gathered his tablet and a small bag from his seat. As he prepared to move to economy class, he paused beside Jasmine. "This doesn't fix the underlying problem. It doesn't erase decades of systematic inequity. But I hope it's a start." With that, he walked through the stunned first-class cabin toward economy, leaving his mother seething in seat 1B and Jasmine standing in the aisle, still processing what had just happened. As Nathan passed the last row of first class, a passenger reached out and quietly said, "Thank you for doing that, Mr. Montgomery." Nathan shook his head slightly. "Don't thank me. I should have done it sooner." For several minutes after Nathan disappeared behind the curtain separating first class from economy, the forward cabin remained unnaturally quiet. Katherine Montgomery sat rigidly in seat 1B, staring straight ahead, her face a mask of cold fury. She had removed her phone from her purse and was furiously typing, presumably contacting the family's PR team or legal counsel. Jasmine stood in the galley, trying to process what had just happened. In all her years of handling difficult passengers and navigating racial microaggressions, she had never experienced such a public acknowledgement and apology, especially not from someone with the power and influence of Nathan Montgomery. "You okay?" Alicia Lopez, the flight attendant from business class, whispered as she slipped into the galley. Jasmine nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure if she was okay. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was beginning to ebb, leaving her slightly shaky. "That was incredible," Alicia continued. "Nathan Montgomery just gave up his first-class seat and called out his own mother for racism. People in economy are already posting about it. It's going viral in real time." Kevin Wilson approached, his expression a mixture of concern and calculation. As a senior crew member, he was undoubtedly considering the professional implications, both for Jasmine and for himself, given his initial failure to support her. "Jasmine, take 15 minutes to collect yourself," he said quietly. I'll cover the cabin. I'm fine to continue working, Jasmine replied automatically. Years of being held to a higher standard had taught her never to show weakness, never to accept special accommodations that might be perceived as preferential treatment. I insist, Kevin said, more firmly this time. Mr. Montgomery specifically requested that his seat be made available for your breaks. It would be inappropriate to refuse. Jasmine recognized Kevin's shift in attitude for what it was, self-preservation rather than genuine concern, but she accepted nonetheless. The opportunity to sit down and process the events of the past hour was too valuable to reject out of pride. As she made her way to seat 1A, Katherine Montgomery deliberately turned to look out the window, refusing to acknowledge Jasmine's presence. The other first-class passengers, however, had no such reservations. You handled that with incredible grace, said the woman in 2B, reaching across the aisle to briefly touch Jasmine's hand. I'm Diane Jenkins. I've got over 50,000 followers on Instagram, and I've been documenting this whole thing. People need to see what happened here today, both the problem and how that young man stood up to it. A middle-aged man in 3C leaned forward. Ma'am, I fly this route every week, and I've never seen any issues with the flight attendants' uniforms. That woman was completely out of line. One by one, passengers offered quiet words of support or simply nods of acknowledgement as Jasmine settled into Nathan's vacated seat. The solidarity was unexpected and touching, though Jasmine maintained her professional demeanor, thanking them politely while avoiding any comments that might further inflame the situation. In seat 1A, Jasmine allowed herself a moment to close her eyes and take a deep breath. The leather seat still held the warmth of its previous occupant, a subtle reminder of Nathan Montgomery's unexpected act of allyship. She wondered what consequences he might face for his public stand. The Montgomery family's influence extended throughout the business world. Katherine undoubtedly had the power to make things difficult even for her billionaire son. Jasmine's phone, tucked into her uniform pocket, buzzed repeatedly with message notifications. Word was spreading through the Atlantic Airways employee channels about what had happened. Her friend Terrell had already texted, "Girl. It's all over Twitter. Nathan Montgomery called out his racist mom and gave up his seat for you. Call me the second you land." Meanwhile, in economy class, Nathan had settled into a middle seat in row 32, apologizing to the startled passengers beside him for the disruption. He had declined their offers to switch to an aisle or window, stating simply that he was fine where he was. He opened his laptop and began typing rapidly, ignoring the whispers and surreptitious photos being taken by nearby passengers. What no one could see was the email he was composing to his board of directors and executive team, outlining new diversity initiatives for Montgomery Tech and committing significant resources to anti-racism training throughout the company. The subject line read simply, "Overdue changes, effective immediately." Katherine's messages remained unread on his phone. Notifications continued to appear. From his chief of staff, from the family lawyer, from his father, but Nathan focused solely on his work, occasionally accepting water from the surprised economy class flight attendants but otherwise keeping to himself. Back in first class, the atmosphere had shifted subtly but significantly. Katherine Montgomery, once the center of deferential attention, now sat in effective isolation. Flight attendants performed their required service for her with professional courtesy but minimal engagement. Other passengers, who might normally have been thrilled to interact with the mother of a famous billionaire, now studiously avoided conversation with her. After 15 minutes, Jasmine prepared to return to her duties, feeling centered and composed once more. As she stood, the businessman in 2A caught her attention. "Ms. Williams," he said quietly, "I'm Lawrence Patel, on the board of Atlantic Airways." He handed her a business card. "When we land, there will likely be some corporate hand-wringing about this incident. If you encounter any problems whatsoever, call me directly. What I witnessed today was exemplary professionalism in the face of unacceptable behavior." Jasmine accepted the card with a polite thank you, though internally she was stunned by this unexpected alliance. Throughout her career, she had grown accustomed to fighting these battles alone, to having her experiences dismissed or minimized by those in power. As the flight progressed into its final hours, a new normal established itself in the cabin. Kevin Wilson, perhaps sensing the shifting dynamics, became notably more attentive and supportive of Jasmine. Alicia from business class found excuses to check in with her regularly. Even the pilots, having been briefed on the situation, made a point of commending the exceptional service of our first-class crew during their announcement about landing preparations. Throughout it all, Katherine Montgomery remained icily silent, her fury evident in her rigid posture and the occasional sharp exhalation when Jasmine passed nearby. She had abandoned her phone after apparently receiving unsatisfactory responses to her messages and now stared fixedly at the seatback screen, though it remained turned off. As the plane began its initial descent into New York, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Harris speaking. We're beginning our approach to JFK International Airport. Current weather in New York is clear, 68 degrees with light winds. We expect to arrive at our gate approximately 10 minutes ahead of schedule." There was a brief pause before he continued. "I'd like to take a moment to thank our outstanding cabin crew for their professionalism and dedication to passenger comfort throughout this flight. Atlantic Airways is committed to providing a respectful and inclusive environment for all passengers and staff. We appreciate your choosing to fly with us today." The pointed message was not lost on anyone in first class. Several passengers nodded approvingly. Katherine Montgomery's knuckles whitened around her armrest. As the plane descended through clouds toward the sprawling metropolis below, Jasmine caught sight of her reflection in a darkened window, composed, dignified, professional. Behind her, phones continued to light up with notifications as the story of what had transpired at 30,000 feet spread across social media platforms at the speed of the internet. By the time the wheels touched down on the runway at JFK, what had begun as a personal humiliation had transformed into something else entirely, a viral moment that would force conversations about privilege, racism, and accountability in unexpected places, from corporate boardrooms to family dinner tables across America. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport," Kevin announced as the plane taxied toward the gate. "Local time is 5:47 p.m. For your safety and the safety of those around you, please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened until the captain turns off the fasten seatbelt sign." What none of the passengers yet realized was that news crews were already gathering in the terminal, alerted by the social media firestorm. Atlantic Airways executives were huddled in emergency meetings. And waiting just past the security checkpoint was Darius Harris, Nathan Montgomery's business partner, who had received a text from Nathan halfway through the flight. "Finally did something you've been telling me to do for years. Meet me at JFK. Terminal 4. It's time we had a real conversation about Montgomery Tech." The moment Flight 357 docked at Gate 42 in JFK's Terminal 4, it became clear this was no ordinary arrival. Through the aircraft windows, passengers could see an unusual flurry of activity on the jetway. Airport security personnel stood at attention while several individuals in Atlantic Airways corporate attire conferred urgently near the gate desk. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain announced, "we've arrived at our gate, but we'll need a few extra minutes before beginning the deplaning process. We appreciate your continued patience." In first class, Katherine Montgomery had already gathered her belongings and stood impatiently in the aisle, ignoring the illuminated seatbelt sign. Her face was a carefully composed mask, but the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her agitation as she checked her phone repeatedly. Jasmine moved efficiently through her landing duties, aware of the curious and sympathetic glances from passengers but maintaining her professional focus. When her phone vibrated with an incoming call from Linda Harris, her direct supervisor who wasn't even on this flight, she let it go to voicemail. Whatever corporate damage control was about to unfold, she would face it with the same dignity she'd shown throughout the confrontation. Kevin approached her in the galley, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "Jasmine, there are executives waiting at the gate. The chief of in-flight services is here. And media." "Media?" Jasmine echoed, her composure finally slipping. Why would media be interested in a passenger complaint? Kevin looked uncomfortable. It's gone viral. The videos from the flight, they're everywhere. #Montgomery stand-up is trending on Twitter. Atlantic Airways PR team is in crisis mode. Before Jasmine could respond, her phone lit up with another call, this time from a number she didn't recognize with a San Francisco area code. In economy class, Nathan Montgomery remained seated while passengers around him gathered their belongings from overhead bins. He had received no fewer than 27 urgent messages from various members of his executive team, board members, and family connections. The only one he had responded to was from Darius Harris, "I'm outside security. Take your time." When the main cabin door finally opened, the flight crew was instructed to hold all passengers while an Atlantic Airways executive boarded. Philip Winters, the airline's chief of customer experience, a silver-haired man in an impeccable suit, strode down the aisle with the practiced smile of someone accustomed to managing high-profile situations. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, reaching Katherine first, "I want to personally apologize for any discomfort you experienced during your flight today. We have a car waiting to escort you through a private exit, away from the situation at the terminal." Katherine's expression remained frigid. About time someone from this airline showed appropriate concern. "I expect a full investigation into that flight attendant's conduct and appearance." Winter's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Mrs. Montgomery. We take all passenger feedback seriously. If you'll follow me." As Katherine was escorted toward the front exit, Winters turned his attention to finding Nathan, clearly expecting him to be in first class as well. When informed by Kevin that Mr. Montgomery had moved to economy, his carefully maintained expression faltered completely. Meanwhile, Jasmine had answered the unknown call to hear the calm, authoritative voice of a woman who identified herself as Zara Johnson, General Counsel for Montgomery Tech. "Ms. Williams, I understand you've had a challenging day," the attorney said without preamble. "Mr. Montgomery asked me to contact you before you disembark. There are several news crews waiting in the terminal, alerted by the social media attention this incident has received. You are under no obligation to speak with them." Thank you," Jasmine managed, struggling to process this surreal turn of events. Additionally, Zara continued, "Mr. Montgomery wants you to know that should Atlantic Airways take any retaliatory action, however subtle, regarding your employment, Montgomery Tech's legal team is at your disposal. We've taken the liberty of documenting all available social media posts about the incident as evidence." Before Jasmine could formulate a response to this unprecedented offer, Linda Harris, her supervisor, was calling again. This time, Jasmine answered. "Jasmine, thank goodness," Linda said, her voice tight with stress. "Where are you right now?" "There's a significant situation developing." "I'm still on the aircraft, completing my duties," Jasmine replied carefully. "Listen, the company is offering you immediate paid leave while this incident is reviewed. It's standard procedure," Linda added quickly, though it was not standard procedure at all. Atlantic Airways had a long history of placing employees on unpaid leave during passenger complaint investigations. "Paid leave?" Jasmine repeated, making sure she had heard correctly. "Yes, full pay and benefits while we conduct a thorough review," Linda confirmed. "The company wants to ensure this matter is handled with appropriate sensitivity." What Linda didn't say, but Jasmine immediately understood, was that Atlantic Airways was terrified of the public relations nightmare that would ensue if they were perceived to be punishing a black flight attendant who had just been publicly defended by one of the world's most powerful tech billionaires. As this conversation unfolded, in Montgomery Tech's San Francisco headquarters, emergency meetings were already in progress. The company's PR team, diversity officers, and senior executives huddled in the main conference room, watching real-time social media analysis of the incident. The sentiment was overwhelmingly supportive of Nathan's actions, with many users expressing surprise and respect for his willingness to confront his own mother's racist behavior. "This could actually be positive for us," noted the chief marketing officer tentatively. "Nathan taking a public stand against racism, even within his own family. It reinforces our commitment to diversity and inclusion. Or it could explode in our faces if not handled correctly, countered the chief operations officer. Katherine Montgomery sits on 3 major foundation boards and has connections throughout the business world. She won't take this public humiliation lightly. In New York, as passengers finally began deplaning, Nathan Montgomery made his way slowly forward from economy class. Fellow travelers stared openly now, some nodding in respect, others snapping quick photos. By the time he reached the front of the aircraft, Philip Winters was waiting anxiously. "Mr. Montgomery, we have a private exit arranged for you as well, away from the media presence." Nathan assessed the airline executive with cool detachment. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Winters. I have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. However," he added, glancing toward the galley where Jasmine was still on her phone, "I would like to ensure that Ms. Williams is afforded whatever privacy she prefers." "Of course, sir. We're offering Ms. Williams paid leave effective immediately while we review the situation." Nathan's expression hardened slightly. "Review what situation, exactly?" "The situation where your employee was subjected to racist abuse while performing her duties professionally? The situation where your senior flight attendant failed to intervene appropriately? That situation?" Winters blanched. "I assure you, Mr. Montgomery, Atlantic Airways has zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind. We're simply following standard protocols for passenger complaints." "My mother's complaint has no merit, and you know it," Nathan replied quietly. "But go ahead with your review. Just be aware that the outcome will receive the same level of public scrutiny as the incident itself." As this conversation concluded, Jasmine emerged from the galley, having finished her call with Linda. She appeared composed but slightly dazed by the rapid evolution of events. "Ms. Williams," Nathan acknowledged her with a respectful nod. "I meant what I said earlier. My company's legal team is at your disposal if needed." "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery, but I hope that won't be necessary," Jasmine replied professionally, though the relief in her eyes was evident. The protection offered by someone of Nathan's stature was no small thing in a world where corporations routinely sacrificed employees to appease wealthy customers. Meanwhile, Terrell Jackson, Jasmine's friend and colleague, had mobilized an impressive show of support. Flight attendants from across Atlantic Airways had begun changing their social media profile pictures to a simple navy blue square, the color of their uniforms, with the hashtag #IStandWithJasmine. The movement had started within airline employee groups but was rapidly spreading to flight attendants at other carriers, creating an unprecedented show of solidarity. As the aircraft finally emptied of passengers, the full scope of the corporate fallout was becoming apparent. Atlantic Airways stock had dropped 3 points in after-hours trading as investors reacted to the negative publicity. Montgomery Tech, conversely, was seeing a modest increase in share value as Nathan's actions resonated positively with consumers and investors alike. Katherine Montgomery had been whisked away through a service entrance, her fury evident to the airport staff unfortunate enough to be in her path. Her first call upon reaching the privacy of the car was not to her son but to Harold Montgomery, Nathan's father and her ex-husband. "Your son has publicly humiliated me," she hissed into the phone. "You need to speak to him immediately." Harold's response was not what she expected. "Katie, I've already seen the videos. If anything, I think Nathan showed remarkable restraint. It's time for you to take a hard look at your behavior." As Katherine sputtered in outrage, Harold continued, "The world is changing, Katie. Our son understood that years ago. Maybe it's time you caught up." Back at the gate, as Jasmine finally exited the aircraft, she was met by a small group of Atlantic Airways executives who escorted her through a private corridor, away from the waiting media. Through a window, she caught a glimpse of the main terminal where several news crews had set up cameras. "We'll provide a car to take you to your hotel," one executive assured her. "All expenses covered, of course. And the company would appreciate if you refrain from making any public statements until our review is complete." Jasmine nodded wordlessly, still processing the extraordinary turn her life had taken in the span of a few hours. As they walked, her phone continued to buzz with messages of support from colleagues, friends, and even strangers who had somehow obtained her contact information. Among them was a text from her mother: "Baby, you're on the news. Call me as soon as you can. So proud of how you handled yourself. Your daddy would be too." That message, more than anything else that had happened, brought tears to Jasmine's eyes for the first time since the ordeal began. 3 months after the incident that became known across social media as #MontgomeryStandUp, Jasmine Williams stood at a podium in Montgomery Tech's San Francisco headquarters. Behind her, a large screen displayed the company's new Diversity and Inclusion Initiative logo, a stylized image of diverse hands joined in a circle, with the tagline, "Accountability begins with action." "When I boarded that flight 3 months ago," Jasmine began, addressing the assembled tech industry leaders, diversity advocates, and media representatives, "I was simply doing the job I had trained for and loved. I had no idea that day would completely transform my life and career." She paused, taking in the attentive faces before her. Among them sat Nathan Montgomery in the front row, beside his business partner Darius Harris. Notably absent was Katherine Montgomery, though her absence told its own story. "What happened to me that day is something many people of color experience regularly." Though usually without the benefit of having it captured on dozens of cell phones, Jasmine continued, drawing a knowing ripple of laughter from the audience. "What made this incident different wasn't the behavior I experienced, but the response to it. One person with privilege and power chose to stand up rather than stay silent." In the 3 months since the viral incident, Jasmine's life had undergone a remarkable transformation. After 2 weeks of paid leave, during which Atlantic Airways conducted what they called a comprehensive review, but was clearly a desperate exercise in damage control, she had received an unexpected job offer. Nathan Montgomery, making good on his mid-air promise to implement meaningful change, had created a new executive position at Montgomery Tech, Director of Workplace Culture and Inclusion. And he had offered the role to Jasmine. "I initially thought he was joking," Jasmine admitted to the audience. "I have a degree in hospitality management, not corporate diversity work. But Nathan convinced me that my lived experience, combined with my years of managing complex human interactions at 30,000 feet, made me uniquely qualified." The career pivot had been challenging but exhilarating. Jasmine had spent her first month meeting with every department at Montgomery Tech, listening to employees' experiences and concerns. She had worked closely with Darius Harris, who had his own stories of marginalization despite his senior position. Together, they had developed the comprehensive program being launched today. "Our initiative has 3 core components," Jasmine explained, advancing to the next slide in her presentation. "First, mandatory anti-bias training for all employees, with additional specialized modules for management. Second, a complete restructuring of hiring practices to eliminate systemic barriers to diverse candidates. And third, a new accountability framework that evaluates leadership not just on financial performance, but on measurable diversity outcomes." What Jasmine didn't mention in her public remarks was the personal growth she had witnessed in Nathan Montgomery over these months. The billionaire who had once considered himself progressive merely for not being actively racist had undergone a profound awakening, confronting his own complicity in systems of inequality. Their working relationship had begun awkwardly, Jasmine still dealing with the emotional aftermath of the incident, Nathan wrestling with guilt over his initial hesitation to intervene. But over time, a genuine respect had developed between them, based on a shared commitment to creating meaningful change. As for Katherine Montgomery, her journey had been more complicated. The viral humiliation had initially sent her into defensive isolation, refusing all contact with her son and unleashing the family's legal team to contain the damage. But Nathan had remained firm. No public statement from Montgomery Tech would absolve Katherine or attempt to minimize what had happened. Instead, he had offered her a choice: attend intensive sensitivity training and education about racial justice, or accept a permanent estrangement from her only child. After 3 weeks of standoff, Katherine had reluctantly agreed to the former. "I won't pretend my mother has experienced a complete transformation," Nathan had confided to Jasmine during one of their strategy sessions. 70 years of entrenched beliefs don't disappear overnight. But she's listening for perhaps the first time in her life, and that's a start. The incident had also strengthened Jasmine's relationship with her own mother. Denise Williams had flown to San Francisco when Jasmine accepted the position at Montgomery Tech, helping her daughter settle into her new apartment with its breathtaking view of the Bay Bridge, a far cry from their modest Baltimore home. "Look at you now," Denise had said, tears glistening in her eyes as she arranged Jasmine's family photos on a shelf. "Your father would be so proud." William Williams had died when Jasmine was 16, never seeing his daughter achieve her dreams of college education and financial stability. But Jasmine liked to think he was somehow witnessing this unexpected chapter of her journey. Atlantic Airways, meanwhile, had been forced to confront its own failings. The incident had exposed not just Katherine Montgomery's racism but the airline's historical pattern of prioritizing wealthy passengers over employee welfare. Under intense public and internal pressure, they had implemented new anti-discrimination policies for both passengers and staff. Policies that now bore the unofficial nickname, the Jasmine Rules, among flight crews. Kevin Wilson, the senior flight attendant who had failed to support Jasmine during the confrontation, had sent her a lengthy email of apology, acknowledging his cowardice and thanking her for the wake-up call. Jasmine had responded with grace, recognizing that lasting change required space for growth rather than permanent condemnation. As Jasmine concluded her presentation, she displayed a final slide, a photo of herself in her flight attendant uniform on her last day at Atlantic Airways, standing proudly with Terrell and other colleagues who had supported her. "This journey has taught me that change happens on two levels," she told the audience. "There's the public stand, the viral moment that catches attention and starts conversations. But the real transformation happens in the quiet moments afterward, in difficult conversations, in policy changes, in daily choices to do better." She looked directly at Nathan. "It takes courage to stand up in a moment of crisis. But it takes even more courage to commit to the long, unglamorous work of creating lasting change. I'm grateful to be part of an organization willing to do both." The applause was thunderous as Nathan joined her on stage, along with Darius and the newly formed diversity and inclusion team. As cameras flashed, capturing the moment for tomorrow's business pages, Jasmine felt a profound sense of purpose. What had begun as one of the most humiliating experiences of her career had become a catalyst for transformation, not just for her personally, but potentially for an entire industry. 1 year later, Jasmine stood on the tarmac of a small private airfield outside San Francisco, watching as a sleek Cessna Citation touched down. The aircraft bore a distinctive logo on its tail, Williams Sky Charter, the startup she had founded with seed investment from Montgomery Tech's new social impact fund. After a year leading diversity initiatives at the tech giant, Jasmine had realized her true calling lay in creating opportunities for others like herself, people with aviation dreams but facing systemic barriers to entry. Her charter service exclusively hired and trained pilots and crew from underrepresented backgrounds, providing a critical first step into an industry that remained stubbornly homogeneous. The plane taxied to a stop, and the door opened to reveal Captain Terrell Jackson, who had left Atlantic Airways to join Jasmine's venture as her first pilot hire. Behind him emerged Nathan Montgomery, returning from a meeting with potential investors in Seattle. "Another successful mission," Terrell announced, grinning as he descended the steps. "And Mr. Montgomery here didn't even micromanage my flying too much." Nathan laughed, carrying his own bag rather than waiting for someone to serve him, one of many small but significant changes in his behavior over the past year. "I've learned my lesson about backseat driving, especially at 20,000 feet." As they walked toward the terminal, Jasmine reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them all to this moment. One incident at 30,000 feet, painful, public, but ultimately transformative, had changed the trajectory of countless lives. It had transformed a flight attendant into an executive and entrepreneur. It had pushed a privileged billionaire to confront his own complicity in systems of inequality. It had even, however incrementally, begun the long process of changing Katherine Montgomery's deeply entrenched prejudices. Most importantly, it had become a case study in corporate training programs nationwide, a reference point for discussions about privilege, accountability, and the power of speaking up rather than staying silent in moments of injustice. As Jasmine checked her phone, she saw a news alert. Atlantic Airways had just announced its first black female CEO, a former flight attendant who had risen through the ranks despite systemic barriers. The announcement specifically cited the airline's commitment to the cultural transformation that began with the Montgomery incident. Jasmine smiled, pocketing her phone without showing the others. Some victories were worth savoring quietly. Some changes spoke for themselves. "Ready for our next journey?" she asked, looking between Terrell and Nathan. The question carried multiple meanings, and both men understood it perfectly. "Always," they replied in unison. The story of Jasmine Williams and Nathan Montgomery teaches us powerful lessons about courage, accountability, and transformation. It reminds us that real change requires both bold public stands and quiet, consistent actions afterward. Standing up against discrimination, especially when it comes from those closest to us, demands extraordinary courage. Privilege comes with responsibility. Nathan's journey shows that acknowledging one's advantages isn't enough, using that privilege to create meaningful change is what truly matters. For Jasmine, the incident demonstrates how resilience through adversity can lead to unexpected opportunities and growth. Katherine's reluctant evolution reminds us that even deeply entrenched prejudices can begin to shift when confronted directly. The corporate responses from both Atlantic Airways and Montgomery Tech illustrate how institutions often require public pressure to implement necessary changes. Perhaps most importantly, this story highlights the ripple effects of a single moment of moral courage. Nathan's decision to stand up not only changed Jasmine's life but transformed an entire industry's approach to discrimination. It shows that systemic change often begins with individual actions, one person refusing to remain silent in the face of injustice. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination happening in a public place? Has this story changed how you might respond? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've ever stood up against injustice or wish you had, tell us your story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another powerful story of courage and transformation. Thank you for watching, and remember, your voice matters. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to speak up when everyone else stays silent to create lasting change.